Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation. We're here today for another one of our conversations at home. As a reminder, we're continuing to raise funds for our SAG-AFTRA members who are affected by all the closed productions, and the link to our COVID-19 fund can be found in the description of the video right below. Today we're joined by Jade Pettyjohn, who is currently starring in the amazing Hulu series Little Fires Everywhere, that if you have not already started binge watching is what you should be doing with your time at home right now, amongst other things. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I know when you had the season premiere that you guys actually did an online watch party, and that was before we were all staying home, and how that's kind of infiltrated into the new way that you're connecting with audiences week by week as the show comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really happy that there was some form of celebration that we were able to have, because I think everyone worked so hard on this series. And I think that it's pretty lucky that each episode is releasing each week and it's not binge, so everyone has something to look forward to as we all stay at home. And yeah, it came out at a really interesting time of our lives culturally, and I'm just hoping that it gives someone something to do while we're all kind of staying indoors.
Yeah, I hope so too. I wanted to talk a little bit about your audition process for the show, because I know, obviously the show is based on a book, and I heard you talking about how the book really became a Bible for you during that audition process. Was that something that you started looking to as a really in-depth resource right when you were walking into that first audition, or was it kind of partway through, and how that helped you to really uncover your character in a different way beyond what was already in the scripts?
Absolutely. I took the book instantaneously. Once I heard that this was becoming a series and a show, and I knew the people behind it, and that not only was Reese and Carrie the women at the helm, but there was just a very female-dominated production behind it, and I was really intrigued by that, and I was so in love with the story. And if you have a book that has so many beautiful clues and nuances and answers that can enrich your performance, I mean, you want to dive right into that, so it was definitely from the beginning. The first audition, I wanted to make sure that I had as much as I could have in order to give a great performance. And it's just such a beautiful book and such a beautiful story, and the audition process was very, very quick. So I think I had one or two auditions, which is pretty abnormal. And then I moved straight forward to the series, and that book stayed with me. It was, like I said earlier, a Bible for sure.
Yeah, and I also know that early on you had a lot of conversations with Liz Ticklar, who's the showrunner, and then also with Carrie and Reese, who are producers on the show, as well as starring in it. And what were some of the things that came out of those conversations that you had before you were filming that really helped inform your performance on the show?
Yeah, I mean, those women are so fierce in telling stories and telling female stories truthfully. So these conversations were about, okay, well, how do we tell this girl's story, Lexi's story, and the show as a whole, in the most real way possible, and in a way that we're not just scratching at the surface. And so I had lots of questions about what the life would be like, so that by the time we really stepped on stage or stepped on the sound stage, we were able to just feel lived in as a family. So I just wanted to really capture what it would be like to live in Shaker Heights and to make that feel authentic and real. And when you're looking at the show, you feel that these people have lived with each other, because the dynamics on this show are so complex, and the relationships are so complex and intricate, that all of the conversations were really geared around headspace and how we grew up, and really diving into histories and backgrounds and breathing a little bit of life into them.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk a little bit about part of your process and the fact that you create a list of 100 questions for each of your characters that you ask yourself about them, because I think that's such an amazing resource and tool that you've developed. And I wanted to ask a little bit about how you developed that for yourself, and how you realized that was a really specific tool that you wanted to use on each project, and how that came into play on Little Fires.
Yeah, so I started doing that. I did a little indie film called Girl Flu a long time ago, and I worked with an actress named Katie Sackhoff, and I remember on her script she had all of these really random notes about her character, about like favorite foods and favorite color and stuff like that, and little doodles. And I remember I was young. I think I had just turned 14, so I was pretty young, and I just remember being like, wow, that this is incredible, that you can go so in depth and you can know so much about your character, and it's not just, playing a stereotype. And so from that point on, I wanted to find out more about whoever I was playing, and I wanted to be friends with them, and I wanted to understand them, and make them human. I think, we all have memories and moments and things like that. So I started approaching that and doing that. And each character changes a little bit, the questions that I ask them. I have 100 questions that are pretty standard that I ask all of them, but there's others that, you have to, Lexi, for instance, in Little Fires, she's based in the 90s in a very different town. And so a lot of that is based off of where she lives and what time period she's from and all of that. And it really helped bring my character Lexi to life. It really helped me kind of get into her headspace and understand her, because she's so interesting and complex.
What was, because you were mentioning the time setting of the 90s, which is one of the really wonderful things about the show. And I was interested in what kind of your research process was with that. Obviously there's the baseline of cultural references that are thrown throughout the show, but also it's really about the way that people connected with each other and the society that they were living, and the racial dynamics in a community like that at that time is different to what it would be today. And so what was that process for you?
Yeah, I think that art is a really great way into how a culture or society lived and operated. So the majority of my research was through the music of that time, through books, through movies, through shows. And I remember looking at Shaker Heights and reading books about it and articles about it. And that really helped get into that view, because like you said, it's not just, it's the 90s and it's like a different time, but it's culturally, there's so many ideas of progressiveness that was around at that time that was so truly regressive, that isn't really around my direct area right now in LA in 2020. So that was really exciting to just dive into not only the music of that time, but also what my character would be exposed to at that time and what she would think and what she would see and listen to. So I really think that art helps other artists,
Yeah, definitely. And then I also wanted to jump into talking about the connectivity of your character with her family members. She's got 3 siblings, you've got your parents. And I loved discovering that you guys did dinners together on the soundstage where you filmed beforehand to really spend time together. And I was really curious to kind of hear a little bit more about that and what came out of that, and whether it was something where you just sat around and it was just getting to know each other as people, or whether you were really talking about the show and talking about your characters and how that looks like for you all.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful thing to be able to sit down with the people that are going to become your family members for the next few months and really dive into, understanding each other and talking about us as actors and getting to know each other in that way. So that's, there's a camaraderie there, but also kind of discovering what our family was like, what we have done, what political conversations were being held at the table, what family vacations did we have, who's our favorite sibling, where do we sit on the table, like who would we want to be next to, and that was a really beautiful thing that we were able to go in and have dinner, and all of us were like, okay, well, she would definitely be here, I would be here, he would be there, and then we just discussed the life of the Richardsons, and we all were able to contribute something to it. And I think there was something really beautiful about such a free creative space where there was no, that's not correct, or that's probably not what would happen. Everyone had the ability to contribute something. And so therefore every actor involved in that family unit was able to contribute to the Richardsons.
Yeah. One of the things that I love and find really interesting in your character is, she's obviously going on this journey, as they all are, where they just really want love and acceptance for who they are. But your character's journey through doing that is trying to emulate her mother. And, she's even described in the show, there's a comment about her being, a mini version of her. And so I wanted to ask you about how you looked to Reese Witherspoon's performance for that, to kind of see how she was playing her character, the way that she had developed and fleshed her out, to figure out what elements and what nuances you were going to take into your own performance.
Yeah, it was great. I think that from the first table read, the first time I saw Reese embody Elena, I was able to understand where she was going to take that character, and it only grew and grew and grew as she's Reese Witherspoon and such a talented individual. And so I just was really trying to find these little nuanced things and then compare that to realities I've seen on how we kind of emulate our mothers, maybe in ways that we don't even realize. So I tried, I was very aware of the way that she was speaking, like her inflections. I saw that she had these like the 90s French tip nails, and I was like, oh my God, my character would totally want to do whatever nails her mom was doing. And they would go get manicures together or something like that, right? And so it's like these little tiny things that make a human being, right? Wanted to look to Reese because she just had so much understanding of who Elena was as a woman. So I definitely looked to her to bring Lexi to life.
Yeah, and obviously one of the most pivotal moments for your character in the season from the episodes that we've seen so far is the abortion scene. And you play it so beautifully and so emotionally and wonderfully, so congratulations on that. And I know that, you had a lot of conversations with Liz Tigelaar and Lynn Shelton, who I think was the director on that episode. So I wanted to ask you how they really helped you to find that moment and how they really helped you to prepare and create a safe space for you to be so emotionally vulnerable on screen, and the ways in which preparing for that scene was really different to the rest of the show for you.
Yeah, preparing for that particular scene started at the beginning of the show. Before we started filming, I was already asking them, how is this going to be shot? What do you want from me? What can I contribute? And then asking them questions about how it's going to be done. If this is just, how is it going to stay true to the book? How is it going to stray? What has she experienced, right? And they were just, the word support just doesn't give it enough credit for what they did. We had a closed set that day, which was incredible, which I'd never experienced before, especially for something that was like this. And it was really just about just truly discovering what that would feel like. And all of the questions and conversations were around how can we make it feel like her world is coming in on her and she's caving in and she's more and more in a cage and falling apart and becoming unraveled, because that episode is the start of Lexi's arc, which is a pretty drastic arc and change, like most experiences do. So it was a really beautiful thing to discover with those two women.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the way that is kind of the beginning of this really huge arc for her as a character. And obviously, creating that scene isn't just about the experience in that moment. That's something that sits with her, that changes who she is as a person. So how did you then subsequently think about the rest of the scenes that you were filming, the way that you wanted that to infiltrate your performance in those?
Yeah, it's the first thing that Lexi's ever experienced that was actually hard for her. Mm-hmm. And the conversations she had around abortions were always like, it's very rare or it doesn't happen to people like us. And so she's always been sort of blinded by her own privilege. Mm-hmm. And so those things felt very distant and very far because she was so insulated. And I think that when something like that happens to her, it creates this little hole, you just pierced something in her little bubble. And so it gives her an in to what being human and what messiness is, and what it feels like to really go through something. And so it's a really interesting moment for her because it does change it. And so from that, she's able to slowly see other people in a way that she wasn't able to see before, because she's felt something that they might have been able to feel.
Yeah. Has there been a difference in the response and connectivity that you felt from audiences and people who are watching that? Because, it's such an important scene that really can speak to a lot of people on a very personal level.
I think the response has been really beautiful to see, because I think that the way that it's represented is so polarizing, because you understand her, and there's so many young girls that go through that experience and feel isolated, and you understand that, and it's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching. But on the other way she handles it is messy and without empathy and understanding for Pearl. And so it was really beautiful to see an audience not only understand her, but also get angry with her and then also empathize with her. I think that was just such a beautiful thing to witness. I always love watching things or reading about things that create a really strong feeling in someone, whether that's positive or negative. And it felt like a lot of the people that I'd spoken to about it or seen had said that they felt really torn and conflicted about who Lexi is, and that's exactly what I wanted to get across. That felt really great.
Yeah, I think you definitely capture all of that. And I was curious, kind of, now that you've obviously wrapped the show and you're watching it come out into the world, what you feel that you really learned about your craft and process as an actor from going through making the show and playing this character.
Oh my goodness, I learned so much, and I think watching the episodes as a whole and seeing everyone's place in it in the proper sequence is already creating more and more lessons for me. But working on that show was one of the most freest spaces I had ever been on as an artist. And it was women like Carrie and Reese and Liz and Lynn and Nzinga and the entire production and writer staff that created this atmosphere in which you were able to freely create. And so for me, it was really about learning that I can take up that space, and if someone's creating that space for you, you perform and you do it unapologetically. And so beautiful things come from that. And I've experienced that. And then all the other cast members have also had that experience as well. So it's a beautiful thing to see the result of it.
That's so amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking time today to chat with us and talk about the show and all of your work on it. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.